The moment Colette Drummond walked into the hotel lobby that Tuesday morning, she had already decided what kind of day it was going to be. She had a board presentation in 4 hours, a short list of 3 properties to cut down to 1, and absolutely zero patience for anything that didn't move at her pace. The Harrington Grand in downtown Calgary was the last stop on her evaluation tour, a 42-floor legacy property that Drummond Hospitality Group had been circling for 2 years. If the numbers held, they were buying it. If they didn't, she was flying back to Toronto before dinner. Colette was 39, sharp in a way that made people careful around her, and she'd built Drummond Hospitality from a single boutique inn in Muskoka into a portfolio worth north of $800 million. She didn't inherit it. She didn't marry into it. She did it deal by deal, year by year, through a series of decisions that most people in the industry had called reckless at the time and called genius in hindsight. She knew who she was. She knew what she was worth, and she had very little tolerance for people who wasted either. Her assistant, a young man named Perry, was trailing 3 steps behind her with a leather portfolio and a coffee he hadn't been asked to get but had learned to bring anyway. The lobby was busy, a checkout rush, a cluster of conference attendees near the elevator bank, a bellhop navigating a luggage cart through the crowd. Colette moved through all of it like water finding the fastest path downhill. She stopped at the front desk. The woman behind the counter was mid-conversation with a guest. Something about a late checkout and a spa booking that had been double confirmed and then apparently lost. The guest was frustrated. The front desk agent was managing it with the careful, practiced calm of someone who'd had this exact conversation 100 times and would have it 100 more. Colette waited approximately 8 seconds. "Excuse me," she said. The agent, her name tag read Bria, glanced over briefly. "I'll be right with you." Colette set her card on the counter, not her personal credit card, her business card. The one with CEO, Drummond Hospitality Group, printed underneath her name in clean serif font. "I have a 9 o'clock with your general manager," she said. "I've been standing here for 10 seconds, and I'd like someone to let him know I've arrived." Bria finished her sentence to the other guest, made a note in the system, and turned to Colette with the same practiced calm. She glanced at the card without picking it up. "Of course. What was the name?" "Drummond. It's Colette Drummond. And do you have a reservation with us?" Colette looked at her. "I'm not checking in. I have a meeting." "Right. I'll just need to ring through to Mr. Whitaker's office." "One moment." She picked up the phone. Colette stepped back from the counter, turned to Perry, and said something low and clipped about the front desk training protocols, being the first thing she was going to flag in her report. Perry wrote it down. That was when she noticed the man sitting in the armchair by the window. He was maybe 50, in a flannel shirt and dark work pants, the kind of clothes you'd wear to drive a truck or fix a furnace. He had a thermos on the table beside him. His own thermos, not something from the hotel, and a paper bag from what looked like a gas station. He was reading something on his phone with his reading glasses pushed down his nose, entirely at ease, as if he hadn't noticed that the lobby of the Harrington Grand was not, by any reasonable measure, a place where a person sat with a gas station breakfast and a personal thermos. Colette's eyes moved to the front desk, then back to the man. She walked over. "Are you waiting for someone?" she asked. He looked up. He had a broad, unhurried face, the kind that didn't register impatience even when it probably should. "I am," he said. "Are you a guest?" "No." She looked at the thermos, at the paper bag, at the flannel shirt. She made a calculation that took about 3 seconds and landed with complete confidence in the wrong place. "The service entrance is around the back," she said. "On 7th. They can sign you in from there." He regarded her for a moment. He didn't look offended, exactly. He looked like a man who had just observed something and was deciding how much of it he wanted to respond to. "Thanks," he said, and turned back to his phone. Colette returned to the front desk. Bria had reached someone in the GM's office and was writing something on a notepad. "Mr. Whitaker is on a call," Bria said, "but his assistant says he'll be right down. In the meantime, can I offer you anything? Coffee, water?" "No," said Colette. She checked her watch. "Tell him I'll be in the restaurant." She walked toward the hotel restaurant without looking back. The Harrington's restaurant was called 32 North, which referred to something geographic that Colette had never cared enough to look up. It was a good space, high ceilings, a west-facing window wall that caught the morning light, furniture that was slightly too trendy for a 40-year-old property, but had been chosen with taste. She sat at a corner table, opened her laptop, and began reviewing the acquisition brief while Perry ordered himself a coffee he'd actually drink this time. She had been there about 12 minutes when she heard footsteps and looked up to find Paul Whitaker, the Harrington's general manager, coming toward her table, and beside him, slightly behind, was the man in the flannel shirt. Colette registered this. She did not visibly react to it. Messieurs. Drummond, Paul said, extending his hand. Thank you for making the time. It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person. He was 50-ish, silver-haired, the smooth and professional product of 30 years in luxury hospitality. I'd like to introduce someone. This is Henry Burr. He's been looking forward to this conversation. Henry Burr sat down across from her with the same ease he'd had in the lobby armchair. His thermos was gone. He did not appear to own a blazer. We've met, he said, not unkindly, just factually. Paul looked between them. Briefly, Colette said. Henry opened the paper bag, not the gas station bag, that was gone too, but a leather portfolio she hadn't seen him carrying before, and set it on the table. Inside was a document she recognized immediately. It was her own acquisition proposal, annotated. I went through your offer this weekend, he said. The number's not the problem. The structure is. Colette looked at Paul. Paul looked at the table. I'm sorry, she said. Could someone explain to me who exactly I'm speaking with? Paul cleared his throat. Henry is the majority owner of the Burr Group. They hold controlling interest in the Harrington and 4 other properties in Alberta and BC. Any acquisition would require his sign-off. Silence. Henry waited. Colette set down her pen with the careful precision of someone making sure their hands did exactly what they decided to do. Mr. Burr, she said. Henry's fine. Henry. She paused. I apologize for the misunderstanding in the lobby. He waved it off, not rudely, but not warmly either. The way you wave off a minor inconvenience you've already moved past. Let's talk about the structure, he said. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Henry Burr was not what Colette had expected, and she had enough self-awareness to recognize that she hadn't really expected him to be anything, because she had categorized him before he'd opened his mouth. That was the thing that sat in her chest, like a splinter through the whole meeting. Not embarrassment, exactly, but something more uncomfortable than embarrassment, something that required more honesty to name. He was methodical. He asked questions that got to the center of things quickly, without fuss. He pushed back twice, once on the transition timeline, once on a staffing clause that he said would gut the institutional knowledge that made the Harrington what it was, and both times he was right. Not technically right in a way that could be argued down. Right in the way that made her wonder why her team hadn't caught it. The staff who've been here 15, 20 years, he said, they're not line items. Some of them know things about this building that aren't in any manual. If you restructure too fast, you lose that, and then in 2 years you're wondering why the guest experience slipped. We have onboarding protocols, Colette said. I know you do. He looked at her steadily. It's not the same thing. She wanted to argue. She had a very good argument prepared. She looked at the clause again and put the argument away. At noon, Paul ordered sandwiches. Henry ate half of one and then took a call that he stepped away for, leaving Colette at the table with Perry and a set of revised deal points she was going to have to bring back to her own board with some significant adjustments. Perry leaned over. Are we still on track? Yes, she said. But there are changes. There are always changes. He wrote that down too, which was not what she meant, but she didn't correct him. When Henry came back to the table, he sat down and looked at the papers and then looked at her. I want to ask you something, he said. Go ahead. If you'd known who I was in the lobby, would you have spoken to me the same way? The question was simple and completely without malice. He wasn't trying to humiliate her. He was asking something he actually wanted to know. Colette took a breath. No, she said. I wouldn't have. He nodded slowly. I'm not saying that to excuse it, she added. I'm saying it because the honest answer is worse than the polite one, and you asked an honest question. Something shifted in his face. Not much, but something. I grew up in Drumheller, he said. My dad ran a small engine repair shop. I wore flannel all through school, and I wore it when I bought my first property, and I wear it now. I tried the suit thing for about 3 years in my 30s. He paused. Didn't take. She smiled, just slightly, despite herself. What made you come back to it? Realized I was dressing for other people's expectations, he said. And I'd spent enough of my life doing that. The deal didn't close that day. It was never going to close in a single meeting. There was too much complexity, too many moving parts, lawyers on both sides who would need to go through everything with careful and expensive attention. But something shifted in that room over 2 hours of conversation and bad hotel sandwiches, something that had nothing to do with acquisition terms. Colette flew back to Toronto that evening. On the plane, she opened her laptop and started a document that wasn't a brief or a proposal or a set of notes. She wasn't entirely sure what she was writing for the first 20 minutes. Then she realized she was writing down what she had decided in the lobby of the Harrington Grand and how completely wrong she had been, and she kept writing because it felt important to say it somewhere, even if only to herself. She had spent 15 years building a company on the idea that she saw things clearly, that her instincts were good, that the reason she'd succeeded where others had failed was some combination of hard work and genuine perception, a real ability to read a room, read a deal, read a person. She had walked into a lobby and looked at a man and seen a uniform he wasn't wearing. She thought about Bria at the front desk, who had been managing a frustrated guest with patience and precision and had not skipped a beat when Colette interrupted. She thought about how she had cataloged that interaction, filed it as an example of inadequate training. She pulled up the note Perry had made, front desk protocols, flag for report. She deleted it, not because Bria had done everything right, maybe she hadn't, but because Colette's judgment in that moment had been contaminated by something she didn't want to admit was there, and she was no longer confident that she'd been seeing clearly. 2 weeks later, she was back in Calgary for a second meeting. She hadn't told anyone she was coming early. She arrived the afternoon before, checked into the Harrington, her own reservation, her own name, no announcement, and spent the evening walking the property the way she liked to walk properties she was considering buying, slowly, quietly, without anyone knowing to perform for her. She ate dinner at the bar in 32 North. The service was good. The lamb was better than it had any right to be for a hotel restaurant. She talked to the bartender for a while, a woman named Josie, who had worked there for 11 years and had very specific opinions about which of the renovations the previous ownership had gotten right and which were, in her words, what happens when consultants don't actually stay. Colette wrote down nothing. She didn't take notes on her phone. She just listened. In the morning, she went down early and had coffee in the lobby, the same armchair by the window. She didn't have her laptop. She watched the morning checkout rush, the way the staff moved through it, the small moments of efficiency and the small moments of friction. A couple who couldn't find their car in the parkade, and a bellhop who walked them there personally instead of just pointing. A child who'd left a stuffed animal at the front desk, and the way Bria, same Bria, different shift, had kept it on the shelf behind her with a post-it note on it that said, "Bunny, room 1407, do not remove." Henry arrived at 9. He came through the main entrance, thermos in hand, nodded at the doorman by name, stopped to say something to Bria that made her laugh, and then saw Colette in the armchair. He stopped. "You're early," he said. "I wanted to see the property without anyone showing it to me." He sat down in the chair across from her. He looked at the thermos in his hand, then set it on the table between them. "You want some? It's dark roast. No milk, sure," she said. He didn't have a spare cup. He went and got one from the restaurant himself, didn't send anyone, just went and came back and poured. They sat there in the morning lobby, the checkout rush moving around them, and drank coffee from mismatched cups. "I owe you something," Colette said. "You don't owe me anything." "I do." She looked at him. "Not an apology. I already did that. Something more than that." She paused. "I've been running acquisitions for 12 years, and I've always told myself that I evaluate properties on merit, not on first impressions, not on surface things, on what's actually there." She turned the cup in her hands. "I walked in here 2 weeks ago and made a judgment about you in 30 seconds that had nothing to do with merit." He was quiet for a moment. Around them, a family was checking out, 2 kids dragging roller bags across the marble floor with the particular abandon of children who have been sitting still for too long. "I'm not going to tell you it didn't matter," Henry said finally, "because it did, not to the deal. The deal's the deal." "But," he paused, looking for something. "My dad used to get that. Walked into banks in his work clothes because he'd been in the shop all day and the way they looked at him." He shook his head. "He built that business from nothing, sent me to university on what he made fixing engines, and people looked at him like he'd wandered into the wrong building." Colette didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say that would improve on the silence. "I wear the flannel," Henry said, "partly because I like it, and partly because I made a decision a long time ago that I wasn't going to make myself smaller so other people would feel more comfortable about where I fit." He picked up the thermos. "That decision has cost me some deals over the years. People who took one look and decided I wasn't worth their time. That's fine. Those aren't the people I want to do business with anyway." "And me?" she asked. He looked at her steadily. "You told me the honest answer when I asked the honest question. That counts for something." The deal closed 7 weeks later. $430 million. The Harrington Grand, plus 2 smaller properties in Banff and Kelowna that had come into the conversation during the second round of negotiations. Drummond Hospitality's largest single acquisition to date and the most complex she'd navigated, not because of the financial structure, which was difficult but manageable, but because Henry Burr was not a man who signed anything he hadn't thought through completely, and thinking things through completely, for Henry Took exactly as long as it took. At the closing dinner, small, private, a restaurant in Calgary's Beltline district that Henry had chosen and that had no dress code to speak of. Colette arrived in the blazer she'd been wearing to every meeting and a pair of dark jeans, not a calculated choice, just what she'd felt like wearing. Henry was already there. He looked at the jeans, then at her, and said nothing, but there was something in his expression that she thought might be approval, or at least recognition. They ate and talked about the transition timeline, about the staffing clause they'd revised 3 times before getting right, about the Banff Properties deferred maintenance list, which was going to be a significant first-year cost. At some point, the business conversation ran out, and they just talked. About the industry, about what it had been like to build something, about the particular loneliness of making decisions that other people would live with the consequences of. "Do you ever second-guess it?" he asked. "The big calls. Constantly," she said. "But I try to only second-guess them before I make them. After, I just have to live with them. Good rule. It's the only way I've found to stay sane." She picked up her glass. "What about you?" He thought about it for a while, which was his way. He never answered quickly when the question deserved more than a quick answer. "I second-guess the ones where I let someone else's opinion of me affect my decision," he said. "Those are the ones I look back on." He paused. "I don't usually do that anymore." She understood that he wasn't talking about business deals. She lifted her glass slightly. He lifted his. 6 months after the closing, Colette was back at the Harrington for a quarterly review with the new management team. The property was performing well, above the projections she'd built, which was unusual, and she was honest enough to admit that Henry had been right about the institutional knowledge, about the staff, about the things that don't appear in any manual, but keep a hotel feeling like something more than a transaction. Bria was still at the front desk. She'd been promoted to front desk supervisor 3 months in, which Colette had not initiated but had not been surprised by when Perry told her. On the last morning, Colette came down early again. The lobby armchair by the window was empty. She sat in it, ordered a coffee from the passing room service cart, and watched the morning begin the way she'd watched it the first time. Quietly, without anyone knowing to perform for her. She had a note on her phone. She'd started writing it on the plane 2 weeks after that first meeting, had added to it a few times since, and had never intended to send it to anyone. It was just a list of things she'd gotten wrong, and what the getting wrong had cost her, not in money but in accuracy. In the clarity she'd always thought was her actual advantage. The lobby was filling up. A business traveler moving fast through the entrance, already on his phone. 2 women at the front desk sorting out what sounded like a billing question. A small boy standing very still beside a luggage cart, watching the revolving door go around as if it were the most extraordinary machine he'd ever seen. She thought about her father, who had run a small accounting firm in Sudbury and had worn the same 4 suits on rotation for 30 years, and had never once, as far as she knew, judged a client by anything other than what they brought through his door. She had not understood, when she was building her career, how rare that was. She thought she understood it better now. She finished her coffee. She had a meeting in 40 minutes and a flight home that evening. She stood up, smoothed her jacket, and picked up her bag. On her way to the elevator, she stopped at the front desk. Bria looked up. "Good morning, Ms. Drummond. Can I help you with anything?" "No," said Colette. "I just wanted to say the bunny system is still going." Bria blinked. Then she understood. She glanced at the shelf behind her, where, on a different morning with a different stuffed animal, a post-it note had told a story about the kind of attention that couldn't be trained into someone who didn't already have it. "We've kept it," Bria said. "For whatever gets left behind." "Good," said Colette. "Keep it." She walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the 4th floor, and thought about everything that gets left behind when we move too fast to notice it, and everything that's still there, waiting, when we finally slow down enough to look.